Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really awesome guest today. He has over 2 decades of experience in digital products, having created consumer web and mobile experiences for consumer and enterprise companies such as GE Digital, Salesforce, Rhapsody, and eBay. Please join me in welcoming Ken Skistimas. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, thanks for having me. And you got my name right. So nice job.
Nice. You ready for 20 questions?
Sure, let's do it.
Great. Question one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah, so currently I'm a product design manager at a little company you may have heard of called Meta. Um, I am currently focused on design systems at Meta. So what this is like how a suite of software looks and works and how it's held together. So if you think about the buttons, like you want those all to kind of be the same color blue across the board, or the way drop downs work, or the way you navigate. Um, so that's been my focus. Been there about four years, and that kind of grew out. I've always been a designer. Early on, my dad was an illustrator growing up, so I'd go to his studio and just kind of parlayed into a career for myself. Started as a graphic designer and grew up with the industry.
Great. Just a note for our audience. I don't know if Ken will remember, but we actually met each other at UX India, the conference in Bangalore, where he was a keynote speaker, and I was on a couple of panels there. It was years ago now, though.
Seems like ages with the pandemic in between. So
Absolutely.
great to reconnect.
Yeah. Question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Um, that's an interesting question. I think in terms of my current skill set, I feel like it's my knack for systems thinking, and that's sort of how I fell into my role now. I really enjoy looking across a bunch of seemingly disconnected things and finding the steel threads between them. Not everybody likes to do that, but I think it's an interesting challenge to kind of put the puzzle pieces together. And I've done that at several of the companies I've worked for. So I think that, not only in terms of like digital products, kind of adding value there in terms of consistency and otherwise, I think there's also, an element of a cultural element you can bring to an organization in that way too. So like while there's the hard deliverables, there's also like these social aspects of kind of connecting the dots between teams and people and whatnot. And like I said, not everybody's into that. That's kind of become my jam over the last few years. So yeah.
Nice. For our audience, I mean, it actually wasn't until recently that I realized that you had joined Meta, and I think I put in the invite for you before I knew that. So that's super exciting. But I think our audience probably hasn't even heard from any of our guests about even the transition from Facebook to Meta. So maybe that kind of stuff can come up as we go through the questions. Number three is why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, I grew up around art and design. My my dad was an illustrator for a number of years. He now designs sets and props and that sort of stuff. My mom went to school for fashion design, so we always had, um, you know, uh, art supplies around the house. Or I'd go to my dad's studio and that sort of stuff. And I think combined with that, there's also this element of DIY growing up where we made a lot of stuff. Not just art, drawings and that sort of thing, but we built something. If we needed, we something around the house, or we'd make it. And I think as the web industry grew, in the early days, it was very hands-on. If you think about I started as a graphic designer, realized, hey, I can write code, and whatever I design, I can actually put out there into the world. So it seemed to kind of mesh those two aspects of kind of the way I grew up. And I just kind of matured with the industry, and I think it's really been that combination of two things that have really, put me in this industry and kept me in it for so long, as I love the challenge of kind of gathering requirements and designing something that's useful and and beautiful, but also the mechanics behind it. Like, how do you do that? And it's been a lot of fun so far, and I don't foresee not doing it in the near future. So, which I guess gets into your next question of what does the future look like?
It does, but before I get there,
Yeah.
just a quick thought here. We had Alex Trochut on the show whose parents were in the typography world,
Mhm.
and then he was in the typography world, and we discussed how strange it is that something like typography can be passed on through the genes. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Super cool that you have that in a way too.
it definitely is. And I have two kids now, and it's been interesting to see how it kind of carries through to them. Um, but just by osmosis, kind of being around that stuff growing up. You mentioned typography. Like I probably wasted hundreds of dollars in press type in my dad's studio as a kid. And it's all part of that curiosity of how do these things work and what looks good together. Um, so yeah, it's definitely it's in the genes, whether you like it or not.
I'll also call out one of our early guests, Dr. Garnett Hertz, who has a book coming out through MIT Press about DIY culture. And that should be interesting.
Yeah,
Number four, yeah, is what does your future look like?
yeah. Like I said, I enjoy what I do. I like one of the reasons I went to Meta was the scale there. So I constantly look for ways to kind of challenge myself. So I think my future, um, definitely involves design in some way, shape, or form. I would like to branch out. I think I've been digital this whole time, my whole career, and I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday just about how transient our work is, and I was sort of joking. I was like, well, the first thing I designed is still out there on the web, unfortunately, but all the good stuff in the middle has kind of faded away over the years. So, I think it would be nice at some point to transition into like you know, hardware or something physical that I could build, which would even, go further into kind of the DIY, aspect kind of my hobbies and that sort of stuff. So, had an interest in poking around at what that might look like in terms of like 3D printing or even machine work or that sort of thing. Something tangible maybe would come down the line.
Maybe it's worth extending the conversation around Dr. Garnett Hertz. He actually has a Canada Research Chair position here in Vancouver, which is a pretty prestigious role. He's been a Fulbright scholar, but after his workday, he goes down to the skate park and makes graffiti basically
Yeah,
with his with his OG friends, he says. So
nice.
yeah, so he's an older guy, so it's pretty cool.
I
Um,
I can relate. I head out to the garage almost after every day, and
right.
tinker out there. So
Sweet. Number five, I say, is unique to this podcast. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
hmm. um, well, let's see. I mean, I got my start. I'm originally from Texas, so 20 some odd years ago, I got up and moved out to the Bay Area, which was a hub for a lot of, and still is, a hub for the tech world. So that was obviously pretty important in terms of all the things I learned and picked up along the way and the people I met. It's interesting how that's changed, though, especially over the last few years, where place, at least in terms of the physical notion of it, is less important as we've gotten into remote work and otherwise. So that's actually like some of the products I'm working on today take that into a factor, and I think that's a really interesting thing to solve. Is like, how do you show up, in a world where not everybody's in the same room anymore. How do you bring that I guess authenticity to these virtual worlds or the remote meetings and that sort of stuff. So I guess the answer is like it was really important earlier in my career, maybe less important now.
And when you say it kind of trickles into your everyday now, are you talking about like products like Meta Horizons or?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Great. Number 6, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
I could do a whole hour on this one. Um, early in my career, I think there's a couple. Like one, coming out of school, um, I had a lot of confidence. Maybe too much. So, one piece of advice would be to check your ego and listen to others. And another piece would be to practice patience. Um, I feel like I can remember back during my time at eBay, which is quite a while ago now, but I look back at how I've grown since then, and I remember coming in there. It was really my first job at like a bigger company, and immediately I was like, "This is ugly. We've got to change this. Why is it so hard to change things?" And not really taking into account all the thought that had gone into it previously, what made it successful, um, and a lot of the rationale behind that. And ultimately, I got frustrated and left. Um, in hindsight, that's where the patience comes in and ego. It's like stop and listen and learn. And perhaps that only comes over time after you've had some experience. But I feel like I was more tempestuous back in my early days.
Nice. Yeah, I can relate. Number 7, what's a day in your life like?
That depends on the day. Um, for most days, I'm working at home now. We have the option to go into the office, but um, we're working cross country. In a lot of cases, so the time shift, is important. So the time I could spend, I was been driving, I could actually use it to meet with folks or whatever. So normally, um, get the kids off to school in the morning. Um, log on around, uh, 7:30 or 8, um, and catch up with partners. Like I'm a design manager, right? So I'm always constantly looking ahead to where my team needs to go and where we should be focusing our resources. So I'll invest a lot of time doing that, catching up with folks. We work a lot with London, what's going on over there. Probably midday, I'll have a sync with my what we call like XFN, so my cross-functional partners. So that includes like engineering manager, um, design program manager, product manager, those types of folks, just to kind of corral, what's going on for the team and what we're hearing cross-functionally, and kind of status check-ins and that sort of stuff. Afternoon, we actually devote a lot of time to looking at design work. So that's probably the most fun part of the day, is actually looking at the work that's coming through. And although I spend a lot of my days in slideshows and spreadsheets and planning documents, I still think it's pretty important to stay grounded in the work. So we'll spend a lot of time looking at the work, the team, and kind of make sure the craft is up to par, and thinking about how it's going to scale across the org as well. That's really important. And usually a few one-on-ones with folks on the team just to check in and see how they're doing. And usually I'll kind of taper off around 5:30. I try to get out. I think now working at home, it's pretty easy to sit in your same chair all day. So I try to get out and either take a walk, or, like I said, go do something in the garage, or get out with the family a little bit. And then if inspiration hits me, I'll sign back on at night after everybody went to bed, and have some quiet time to work before I wind down myself. But that's generally what most days look like.
The high point of my design industry career was working at the computer maker Lenovo, and I definitely remember kind of going home at the end of the day, getting on the Mac and doing the work then. Like that's when the work started. It was very much like that. Otherwise,
yeah, it's interesting. I had this and it's one of your later questions. I had this epiphany like a few years ago where I really pressure myself to keep working. And then I realized, like, if you're putting in, one of the expressions I use is like, if you're putting in 200%, you're getting 75% back, like something's wrong. So I've learned over time to kind of be smarter about how I use my time and my energy, right? So sometimes that's getting away, taking a walk, and kind of, background processing, if you will, so you can come back and actually put out stronger work that you're happier with.
Cool. Number 8, lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
A lot of I read a lot of Medium articles, and I'm fortunate the design community at Meta is pretty big. So connecting with the colleagues there, there's a lot to learn from folks there, from where they've been and what they're working on now. That's been a big part of it. LinkedIn, of course. There's learning courses there that I'll, check in from time to time. Keep an eye on conferences here or there. You mentioned UX India, it's a variety of different things. I think I also like, in terms of learning, it's not all design focused. I tend to take inspiration from different things, and I'll look at like there's a podcast, or maybe it was a Netflix show, Sound Exploder, right? Like how are they, how these songs are built, right? It's like, what can I learn from that I could apply, maybe in a way to what I'm doing, even though it's a completely different industry. So it's different. It's a lot of different stuff that I should take in and absorb and process.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think as a Christmas gift, somebody signed me up for masterclass.com, and I thought, oh, what an overpriced, kind of, what a waste. And then every few months I'll pull up a couple of the masterclasses courses and go through it. It just kind of occurs to me that I could get inspiration that way, and it's actually been really high quality. It's been really good, but it's not like something I do every day. You know what I mean? I think lifelong learning.
Yeah.
Can be like that.
Yeah. There's different. Depends on what's going on, in terms of what you're ready to kind of consume and how you do it. So there's plenty of avenues. Masterclass is interesting because, like I said, it doesn't always have to be about design, or whatever your day job is. There's ways to learn from all sorts of different stuff. I tend to look back a lot at like even old engineering, kind of documentaries and that sort of stuff, or just kind of learning how people did things before and what you can learn from that, which is a counter to the tech industry, but it's I don't know. I get a lot of inspiration from that sometimes.
Nice. And then tools. What tools do you use? Are you digital and analog?
Yeah, I'm a blend of both. I kind of use your typical tools during the day that in the tech industry, Google Docs, Figma, we do all of our design work in, Workplace, but I always keep, a sketchbook and, a notepad on my desk. And so that's generally where I start when I'm going to get some thoughts together. And I don't know whether that's just kind of a nod to my roots. For a long time, I kept a set of Prismacolor markers, a graphics 360 pad, and an X-Acto knife on my desk. Just because that was the stuff I kind of grown up with. So that's evolved to some degree. But yeah, I tend to try to I'm a strong believer in getting stuff down early and often, even if it's rough. And paper is often the way to do that, and you can translate that somewhat to digital, given some of the tools out there, with the digital whiteboarding otherwise, but it's still easier just to kind of pick up a pencil sometimes and then translate that. So yeah, I tend to kind of balance.
Awesome. Halfway, number 10, how do you deal with work-life balance?
It's funny, for a good part of my career, that didn't exist. And I would give, everything I had to work and then more. And then I kind of came to the realization that that's not really good for anybody. I basically burned myself out. And this came, I think, towards the tail end of my time at Salesforce. where we shipped some really good stuff, but I really felt like I had nothing left in the tank there. And I resolved after that, where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna work a lot smarter now. And this probably coincided with, as my family grew and my kids got older, subconsciously, thinking about that sort of stuff. But I also think, just in terms of like putting out your best work and being and feeling proud of that, it's important to give yourself space to do that. So I tend to fence off my time pretty well now. Like I mentioned, like my best hours, I remain focused like during the day, like typical work hours. But I'm not working till, I mean, there was a time where I would pick back up at 11 and work till like 4 or 5 in the morning, and um, I realized that's not healthy. So I've tried to be a lot smarter about how I do that now, and there's a lot of value in kind of shutting off, right, and changing your brain and focusing on something else. And like I said, you can sort of background process whether you know it or not. So work will always take, it will take more from you and then ask for more after that. So it's up to you to kind of protect your time, and I try to do that now. So we have tools at work to kind of enforce that. I also try to encourage it on my team. But it's up to you to kind of find protect your own time and create your own work-life balance.
Nice. Number 11 is, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
It's an interesting question. I think as I've, carried on in this career for 25 years, I'm like, I don't know what else I'd be doing.
Mm.
Especially since it's just got, some history in my family. I think early on, I had the opportunity to go to Art Center in LA, because I'm also like a big, like I love cars and automotive design. So, maybe in that sense, if I look at someone like, I would say like Chip Foose, who's like a famous car designer, that's, maybe plan B, what I would love to be doing is like, automotive design. A complete tangent, if I can do any of that stuff and no design at all, I, also have a passion for cooking. And so, maybe I'd be a chef. Also, I'd say in a similar vein, there's that level of craft in there that I really enjoy, and kind of the science behind it. So yeah.
Nice.
Designing cars or cooking food.
Nice. And then, so with your career, what would you not like to do?
That's an interesting question, because I've always been pretty open to, like, whichever way the wind blows. And I think there's something to having a growth mindset and approaching things that way. But I also think there's a lot of value in being clear in terms of your boundaries. For me, it's like, I feel like you have to have a level of passion in terms of the work you're doing. So, there's some products out there that I just kind of don't jive with, or doesn't click with me, or I don't see value in, right? And I'm not going to name off a list or anything, but I do sort of have those boundaries in my head, where it's like, I went to Meta to work on business tools, and I felt a sense of purpose in that, because I was like, okay, like, millions of people use these tools. It's empowering, small businesses, with more reach, and enabling all sorts of people to start businesses that wouldn't have been otherwise. So that's important to me. So for things I wouldn't like to do, if that sort of purpose is missing for me, like, I'm not going to sign up for it.
Yeah, that's come up before. It's really hard to do stuff that doesn't align with your values.
Yeah.
Number 13 is, what's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Oh gosh, I'm notorious for quoting movies. I don't know if I have a favorite movie quote. Back to the Future comes up a lot. But I think my favorite word is authentic. And this is something that I just realized over the years is really important to me, in terms of like feeling like the way I operate, I'm being true to myself. Also, in even my various hobbies and collections, I want the authentic real thing. Like one of my hobbies is record collecting, and I always want that first pressing. Like this is the first one that came out, or in my office I have screen prints, and it's like this is an authentic screen print that someone made. So that's probably my favorite word right now. In terms of like a quote, I won't go to the movie route, but one I use a lot also is like Chuck Close is a famous artist, and if you look at his paintings, often they're you back away and you see kind of like gestalt. But if you move into it, they're all made up of little pieces. And he has a quote about like if a problem seems too overwhelming, if you're overwhelmed by the size of a problem, break it down into smaller pieces. So I'll use that a lot, especially working kind of in the systems landscape like I do.
I remember early in my career, I was in a salary job, kind of a salary desk job as an interface designer, working with a pen tool. And I was trying to pen tool out some stuff, and I kept getting these kind of wonky curves. And I would ask the senior designers what to do, and they said to zoom in and zoom out like a lot. I thought they were like screwing with me, messing with me, right?
Yeah.
And so like I kind of brushed it off, and I would ask another person and they would say the same thing. And eventually I realized that that's actually what you have to do. So it's super interesting.
There was a one of the design leaders I worked with in my career. He mentioned that when I first met him, he was like, "Yeah, no, you kind of zoom in and out, in a metaphorical sense." And I kind of didn't get it at the time, but actually, it turned out to be a really useful piece of advice. And I feel like even in my role today, I was talking about my day to day earlier. At one level, I'm operating at this very strategic, like where should we steer the team and what should we invest in? But then, in the afternoon, we go into crit, and it's like, okay, how many pixels apart, should these things be, or what's our font scale going to be? So that's kind of how that manifests day to day. But it's also like, I think if you're looking at something, it's sort of inherent in the tech industry to have these big dreams and boil the ocean, so to speak. And sometimes you got to take it one step at a time, and that's okay. So break it down into smaller pieces. What's the stepping stones to get there?
We had John Maeda on the show, and in his book Speak Machine, he talks about how computers can infinitesimally zoom in and out to the grandest scales. It's quite interesting. Number 14 is what's your favorite or least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I think I just used one, which is boil the ocean. I'm not a big fan of corporate speak in corporate phases. So, anytime anybody says synergy, I shudder. So I try to avoid those kind of hackneyed corporate phrases as best I can, but it's inevitable. I use them myself and other folks, but do during the course of the business day. But those are like my I think anytime anybody says one of those, like or acronyms, I think are an epidemic in corporate world.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You talk about the zooming in and zooming out. That'll come up as like context switching. And it can be exhaustive. Like you said, a computer can do it. Millions of times a second if it needs to. But for people, like it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about protecting your time and making space for that. It can be really exhausting for us to do. So it's important to kind of recharge and set your brain up to do that sort of, zooming in and zooming out in a sustainable way.
Yeah, computers don't get tired, but we do.
No, maybe the fan kicks on for them, but but yeah, no, they can keep going.
If you had to choose one word to describe yourself, what would it be?
Yeah, I think this is I'm going back to my favorite word from earlier, like authentic. There's not a lot of pretense to me, and I try to keep it that way. But I think in the same way, you can be that way, but also be very brash. So I try to be respectful in that sense. So, what you see is what you get with me. So I think if you're going to describe myself, it would be authentic. Actually somebody on my team the other day, we were we were talking about how to describe ourselves, and he described me as stoically empathetic, which I thought was really interesting. Like two words that kind of seem like they don't map, but it's like, you know, stay the course, but acknowledge, you know, what's going on around you and what other people are feeling.
16, what keeps you up at night?
I think honestly, keeping myself relevant in the industry. I've been doing this 25 years now. It's kind of like, what's next? What's the next interesting thing? I built up this cache of products that I've worked on, from consumer to business and enterprise. And it's like, what else can I learn? Where do I go next? Even in the sense of like, have I turned out, in the tech industry? So I've been, I think about that a lot.
Final stretch, number 17, what's a dream you're chasing?
I've always thought it would be really cool and to have, if I think about, I live out here in Northern California, so we'll often take trips out to the coast, or to a little small town, north, just to get away. And, in every one of those towns, there's kind of the canonical hangout place, right? Where you go and like the food's solid and it's just kind of the place where you hang out, or better yet, it's someplace people know of and they visit there, right? So, I think at some point, the dream would be to have a place like that, and my wife and I sort of, joke about what that might look like. It'd be like, okay, it'd be like some barbecue, because we cook, and then it'd be classic cars, but it'd also be like this, the shop with kind of like, home decor. One day I think that's the long term, is to kind of, have the place in one of those small towns.
Cool. What inspires you?
All sorts of different stuff. We were talking about how do I keep up on things earlier. I mentioned I collect records. I get a lot of inspiration from music. Some new, some old. I think what inspires me are really great works. And I'll take kind of a typical example. If you look at a record like Dark Side of the Moon, that's become this the staple in culture and in music, and it's sort of this high watermark, and I like those sort of things inspire me. Or I look at like I was watching a Tarantino movie the other day, and a level of craft was in it, or Wes Anderson movie, and it's like I'm always amazed and impressed when there's an artifact that sets a new standard or something, or becomes its own thing over time. And I think that's what I've been, I guess, going back to the previous question, outside of the little bodega at the beach, a dream I've been chasing is to create one of those things, and to something that's stands the test of time and would be considered classic. But those types of things really inspire me, whether it's music or art or movies or otherwise. I just think that's really cool, and I always wonder what it felt like while those things were coming together. Did they realize it was going to be that great, or were they just kind of in the zone and made what they thought would be best? Yeah.
Cool. 19. Any advice you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about authenticity. I think for folks out there, maybe growing their careers, I think, I would want them to know that you don't have to change yourself. I think there's something to orienting around your strengths that a lot of people forget. And if you think you have to change yourself to to meet a goal or reach some point in your career, think hard about that, right? So stay true to yourself. Like, think about what you're good at, where you'd like to grow, and sometimes you'll get. I think that'll steer you in an honest direction. I think there was a point in my career where I know there was, where I felt like I had to change to be successful, and after chatting with some mentors and otherwise, I realized no, it's actually the other way around. Like, take what you're good at, and grow in a way that feels honest to yourself, and you'll be successful that way. It sounds very simple, but it's hard to do when you have all sorts of variables pulling at you all the time. But that's something I wish. I don't know if I would have told myself that, 21, I probably would have blown it off, because, like I said, I felt like I was, had a little bit of an ego. But I think that, combined with just kind of be kind and empathetic to others, which also sounds simple, but it goes a long way.
Great. And number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you, or maybe how do you want us to view you and your work?
I tend to keep a relatively low profile on social media, just because I'm busy throughout the day. That's sort of an intentional choice of mine, is like, I'll throw myself into my work. So, I guess the first thing would be, like, keep an eye out for what's coming out, on the horizon, in terms of what I'm working on and Meta. I will post on LinkedIn from time to time. Folks are welcome to connect with me there. I pop up from conferences here and there, and talk about work. And then got a few articles on Medium too that I'll tend to publish there from time to time. So always happy to connect with other designers or folks in the industries, and have these sort of discussions. They're pretty fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's such a pleasure to bring someone on from Meta, and also to hear about your journey, and to remind me of how special a time that was in Bangalore. You were definitely a part of that, and it's something I'll never forget.
Yeah, it's definitely stuck with me. It was an experience.
Great. Okay, well, thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.